We have a number of members of staff who are going to talk to you briefly about areas of the school curriculum where this kind of higher order thinking definitely goes on. And the first one, I think, is Mr. Lorraine. We're going to talk about eating. Fantastic. This is Latin, isn't it?
This is the Latin, I hope so. Good evening, everyone. I was quite surprised but delighted to be asked to talk, as I'm convinced that Latin can play a part with cognitive acceleration. And I'm very, very proud to be part of a talk which had the banner headline of 21st Century Learning. That made me very happy indeed, so hopefully I can continue in that vein. Okay, tonight I'd like to tell you a little bit about Latin and show you something about the process of looking at Latin, translating Latin, because process is the value here when you're looking at cognitive acceleration, how the students are able to go through a series of problem-solving activities to actually come out with meaning and hopefully not come out with complete rubbish. It's an ancient language, of course, but as I say, there's an awful lot of process involved, and please remember that process. I started off with some simple Latin, shall we say, and it's up on the board. Caeculius ad urbem contendit quod solicitus erat, Julius Clemens quoque ad urbem festina verem, maxima urbem fies complebat. And that means, I'm not going to ask somebody to translate that because that would be mean. Caecilius hurried to the city because he was worried. Julius and Clemens also hurried to the city. A really big crowd was filling the streets, which is fairly basic, but how do you actually translate this? What are the processes involved? And it's not just a case of throwing all the words up there and sort of saying, well, if you know what that means and that means and that means, then you can bring it all together. There is quite a lot of problem solving involved. You've got to know the difference between nouns and verbs. You've got to be able to realise the difference between a subject and an object, and you've got to understand that whether a verb actually goes with the subject up there. You've got to pay attention to the tense of the verb. You've got to be able to recognise clauses. Up there's one causal clause, because he was worried. You need to be able to look at adjectives and be able to deal with those. So it's not just the words up there, it's the process of recognition and actually putting them together so that you know that it makes sense. It's a process of understanding rules and to apply them correctly. And the thing is, how do you actually get people to understand those rules? I've got a few slides to show you a little bit of the teaching. They're either really, really difficult or really, really hard. Really, really simple, you decide. But it might give you a little idea as to how it's actually taught. And okay, there. We use the Cambridge Latin course, which some of you may have used in your time. It's a beautiful course, and it is full of meaning in that the sentences are actually supposed to mean something, and it's really, really tied into the graphics which are up there, so that you can see that Caecilius est Ignacio, sentence 1, is something to do with the guy in the toga that's standing there looking suave. And today he has a friend coming, and you get the second sentence, amicus Caecilium salutat. And this is what those pupils have got to deal with. They're looking at the sentence, and I tend to basically read the sentences out, and then they start to explore and to think about what's going on there. Caecilius est Ignacio, amicus Caecilium salutat, metella est Ignacio, amicus metellum salutat. You see, it's a kind of a story, isn't it, where you've got a couple of characters that are in their respective rooms, and atrium's the main room, and you've got a friend that comes to visit. So the pictures make it fairly apparent. The thing is, how does it work as a piece of language? I've just picked a sentence, basically. You start to get them to think about the sentence. Caecilius est Ignacio, amicus Caecilium salutat. They tend to be able to understand that and to translate it. But the really significant question which brings on their understanding of the language is, why does Caecilius become Caecilium? Caecilius est Ignacio, and in the second sentence, it's amicus Caecilium salutat. I'm not going to give them the actual rule. I'm going to try to elicit the idea as to why the language is working in that way. And I'm going to give the question mark, isn't it strange you've got a language that just has these words that suddenly change their ending? The story becomes even more exciting as we move to the extra people in the house. Quintus, the son, he's there in his toga, looking dashing, and the friend obviously knows him really well because he greets him again. Service Esniarchia, the slave, has been doing some work in the main room, and the friend is keeping his distance, but that's respectful for a Roman. The dog is there, and it amuses me just how gingerly the friend is actually approaching the dog. But by this time, of course, the students are so intrigued by the storyline that they really cannot wait to tell you what's actually happening here. Okay, yeah, and it's simple Latin, but basically what you're looking there is the fact that in the first sentence, Quintus is the person who is the most important thing in the sentence, grammatically speaking. In the second sentence, he's subordinate to the friend. The friend is greeting Quintus, and that is the basic difference between subject and object. But it's not given as a rule. It's they are to deduce it from the actual content of the course. There we go. Right. And that really is the way in which we teach Latin. The language is introduced in context, that you elicit meaning, and therefore you're getting the students to work out their own sort of rules rather than be told them in a textbook fashion. It's demanding, and yeah, there are an awful lot of grammar rules, which means that you can read more and more complex Latin. But that's the approach. I think it does have a role in the ideas in cognitive acceleration. It's the phrase that I found really quite good. It's guided self-discovery with a lot of thought that goes into it. As the course goes on, the approach is still the same, basically. Here you have a family from Alexandria, a mum, a dad, and a ravishing daughter. Hic est Aristo, second sentence, haec femina est Galatea, haec puella est Helena. And as I say, the thing is, you look at the sentences, it obviously means this man's Aristo, this woman's Galatea, this girl's Helena. But why is Aristo hic? Why is Galatea haec? Why is Helena haec? And yeah, that's a simple sort of example, but of course it's to do with gender. So just those examples are that, yeah, by using this sort of cognitive approach, you are able to teach really quite complex grammar, but the students take on board the grammar at their own level. You're not telling them, you know, my primer says that you must take 5 sides down of information here. It's the reading that they're able to deal with as they could work through the course. Yeah, and from looking at that, I've just kind of taught you simple uses of the nominative and accusative case, simple uses of the demonstrative pronoun with agreement. So, yeah. Okay. My subject isn't only just language, by the way, it's also culture, and we do like to not just give information out, but to make them work for their understanding. And yeah, I know it's labelled there, but they don't tend to read the labels anyway, so it doesn't make much difference. And you do get them to sort of look at the picture and to hypothesise, basically, to observe and to hypothesise what's actually going on. And it is quite interesting that that is an example of a mosaic. I think in its context there are lots and lots of pictures of gladiatorial fighting. So I said, well, if there's lots and lots of pictures of gladiatorial fighting in other parts of the mosaic that aren't reproduced, what does that tell you? And basically the hypothesis surely is that the Romans did listen to music as they were watching the gladiatorial fight, something that you guys might not know. But I'm trying to say that we're looking at different sources. You're looking at language, you're getting them to hypothesize about that. You're looking at pictorial sources, you're getting to hypothesize about that. And you're looking at this is a translation of some sports results, basically, from a gladiatorial fight. They're authentic. They're actually from Pompeii. They were painted on walls and translated. So you can actually see that you've got different types of gladiator. A Thracian versus a Milo. One Pugnax, 3 times a winner, died Muranus from Nero's school, 3 times a winner. Okay, that's sad. But then you get on to the next ones, and you've got heavily armed gladiator versus the Thracian, won Cycnus from the school of Julius, 8 times the winner, allowed to live Atticus from the school of Julius, 14 times the winner. And basically you're starting to hypothesize as to why that might be happening. Why was he allowed to live? What was it about the gladiator that did that? And of course it's something to do with popularity. But they're extracting that information from looking at the source and hypothesizing. Okay, and yeah. So strange as it may seem, a subject that's thousands of years old, I think can contribute to the thinking skills. It's got great content, but a lot of it is to do with the process of looking at the subject, to observe, to analyse, and to make abstract sort of conclusions for both the language and the literature. And hopefully that can contribute to a 21st century education.